form. And it's always the first thing that I tell people to work on. So I'll tell you a few things that I'm doing differently this summer than I've ever done before, and maybe some of that will resonate. So I am an assistant professor at the Capstone College of Nursing, Roll Tide. I'm a registered nurse, a certified health and life coach, a Wellbeing Ambassador. I've done that for both the Honors College and the College of Nursing. I'm a current ambassador for the College of Nursing, and I have been your wellness class educator for 7 years. It's amazing. Carolyn McVicker called me in 2019, the fall of 2019, and said, "Are you available to cover a class tomorrow morning? We have had a cancellation and we have someone who's going to be out and we need someone to fill in." And I said, I was stopped at a red light very close to campus on my way into work. And I said yes without even knowing the topic. And then here we are. So it's been a joy. You can still reach me at abby.horton@ua.edu. And I'm always happy to connect you with resources because Bama has been such a great community for me personally as I have gone through my own wellness journey and continue to do so. So my disclaimer is that this is just for educational purposes and doesn't constitute medical or nutritional advice. Y'all can ask me any questions that you like. If it's too medical or too personal, then I'll recommend that you talk to your healthcare provider. But I always like to answer as many questions as I can. So think about, and you can put in the chat if you would like, but you don't have to. But consider, how much water have you had today? How do you know when you're dehydrated? And then what do you reach for when you're tired? So I'll give you my answers out of transparency. I don't ever ask my students to do something that I'm not willing to do. So I'm working on my hydro flask today. This is the 32 ounce. And I love it because it's easy to carry. It's got this lid, but you can get multiple different kinds of lids. And then I like to use my silicone straw because the hard rubber straws that come with like the Stanleys and things really bother my teeth. So I like to have this, and then I just bend it over into my drink. I know that's not the most sanitary thing to do, but I bend it over into my drink and I'm able to put my lid on, and it's really easy to carry. The downside is that it doesn't fit into a car cup holder very nicely. So I am over halfway through with my first one of these. We had a faculty meeting this morning, and we have our field day and lunch this afternoon. And so I'm a little bit behind on my water where I normally would be. And how I know I'm dehydrated is I will have those kind of gulps like I just did there. My lips will be pretty dry. My mouth will feel dry, kind of like I've gotten some cotton, but that's when I'm really dehydrated. If you start to feel like you're slowing down or have some brain fog, or you feel like you haven't gone to the restroom all day, those are signs of you're really kind of advanced into your dehydration. But there are other more subtle cues with dehydration. So it's really important that you always have something like water nearby to sip on throughout the day. The minimum recommendation is 8 8-ounce glasses. That's very old school, of a minimum of 64 ounces of water a day. So essentially, it would be two of these hydro flask a day, where others have said the more recent recommendation is half of your body weight in ounces a day. So if you weigh 200 pounds, that you would drink 100 ounces of water, with the caveat that you wouldn't have more than 128 ounces of water because you can overhydrate yourself. That, too much water, too much of a good thing, can be harmful. And so that's kind of the range, 64 ounces to 128. And let me tell you, if I drink 128 ounces of water on a typical day for me, I feel like I'm floating. Like, I feel like I have water up to my eyeballs. But if I only drink 64 ounces of water, I feel dehydrated. And so my sweet spot is around probably 90 to 100 ounces of water on a day where I'm really active and I'm teaching a lot. Closer to 80 to 90 ounces if it's going to be a pretty calm work day and I'm not talking a lot, I'm not teaching. I don't need as much water because the more that we talk, sometimes like me, the faster we talk, and then the more respirations you have with that, the more times we're breathing in and out, the more water that we get and the moisture gets expelled and we lose. And so that's something that I had to learn by just tracking my numbers. Like, okay, I'm going to drink 64 ounces of water today. Did that feel like enough? Okay, I drank 128 ounces of water today. Did that feel like too much? And so that's kind of how you learn your body, right? Our body speaks to us, but it speaks to us in whispers. And so it's really important that we get quiet enough, and that's really hard to do, especially in May, to get quiet enough to kind of listen to what our body is telling us. So I want you to also think about, what do you reach for when you're tired? A lot of times it's not water, but water can often be something that helps us, because once we get dehydrated, even slightly dehydrated, um, we start to feel fatigue. So one of the things that's really important to note is, if you're already feeling just very parched and very thirsty, you are already dehydrated at some kind of level. So you can put the number in the chat if you want to, but today, did you have coffee before water? Do you feel tired right now? Do you have headaches or frequently get headaches, or do you feel puffy or inflamed? So I can't necessarily see the chat in this view. I'm going to open it up and kind of move over and see if I can see you guys. But let's see what we've got. 48 ounces so far, about 10 ounces. Only had coffee today. Yes, making the water more of a flavor can be really helpful. 2 and 4. I'm definitely 4 today. I'm having some kidney stone, kidney issues, and I definitely feel puffy and inflamed. Plus, it's kind of the week for that, where, it's the week after finals week, which should have a name, like post finals week, where you're just really kind of tired and kind of winding down from the end of the semester. There's also a lot of things going on, I'm sure, in your lives. My oldest is graduating high school, so the group chat is wild right now for all the parents and the students too. And there's Mother's Day. There's just so many different things, right? We celebrated Star Wars and Cinco de Mayo and Field Day. There's just lots of reasons to be tired and puffy today. But it looks like there's a lot of variety. And I usually do have coffee before I have water, and that's not a great habit. A better habit is to have your water and then your coffee. But, some days real life just requires you to start with the coffee first. But it definitely is something that you want to pair your coffee and water together. And that's what we call habit stacking. So I don't let myself have coffee without having a water nearby. So that may be something that you can think of. Last night, because I was experiencing kidney stones and had just gone to the doctor yesterday to kind of get an update on some health things that were going on. I actually had 6 drinks lined across the bathtub. I had gotten in there just cool down. And one of my daughters came to check on me, and she's like, "Do you know you have 6 drinks?" And I said, "Yes, I do. They all have different things." One was a coffee, because sometimes that can help dilate. And it was late in the day, so she's like, "You're drinking coffee at this hour?" And then I had my big Stanley, and then I had a water with a Element packet in there. I mean, just all of the beverages, right? And so it was kind of funny. I snapped a picture of it, because I was like, okay, I want to remember this, because I always try to reflect when I'm having a symptom or having a challenge or something like that. Often what I teach from comes out of those lived experiences for me. So the majority of our body is made up of water, about 70 to 80%. You're going to see different statistics and percentages on that, but 70 to 80% is what we typically will see. And a lot of that is due to our actual water weight and content within our body systems. So water supports our blood volume. So if we're dehydrated, our blood is going to get thicker. If you've come to any of the cardiovascular classes I've taught, you'll know that. Oxygen delivery, so it helps get our oxygen where it needs to go. So when we're dehydrated, that's also why we have that brain fog, because we're not getting oxygen to the brain and to the different body systems. Um, and then temperature regulation, of course, having enough water on board helps us with kind of our internal thermostat. our lymphatic drainage. So our lymph system, we know you know about lymph nodes, they're all throughout our body. When our lymph needs to drain, it really is important to have water on board or that lymph can get backed up. That's why we can get puffiness in the face and in our body systems. If you have kidney stones like I do, that's another reason that you can, because the lymph is not moving the way that it should and it gets backed up into your body. And you can usually see it in your face first. It's usually the most dramatic there. And so one of the things you can do is like dry brushing, gua sha, lymph massage, things like that, because unlike the blood system with our heart, the heart is the pump that pumps the blood. The lymph doesn't have a pump. So that's why it's important, if you're able to do things like jumping jacks, rebounding, squats, full body movement, because that gets the lymph flowing. And that's why it's so important to exercise. Water also helps with joint lubrication. It's really important. It's like they say a lot of times in physical therapy or OT or nursing, like motion is lotion for the body because it keeps everything lubricated and moving correctly. And so motion then is your exercise, but it's also your daily movement throughout. So if we're sitting in a chair all day, and I have done this many times in my life where we're in our chair all day and we exercise maybe for 30 minutes or an hour, but if we're not moving throughout the day, our body really isn't getting enough movement. And then detoxification. So water helps move all of the things that need to be processed by the kidneys and the liver and get it out of the body. And then it gets excreted through our bowel movements and through voiding, which is our nurse speak for when we have urination. And so those are two really important things. So if you have constipation, that also could be a water dehydration issue, not just a GI gut issue. So when we're dehydrated, our cortisol rises because our body feels like a physiological stress. Our heart rate increases, our brain fog increases because we're not getting that good oxygen. The heart rate increases because we are trying to get more oxygen in the blood out to the body. And then our fatigue worsens because our body's working overtime. So hydration matters for so many reasons, but it's just your overall quality of health, your energy, your focus and cognition. So how well you're thinking, your mood regulation, because this will impact how your hormones and your blood sugar work. So your mood can be off. It can kind of be like a roller coaster. Your digestion, your skin and your hair, how healthy they look. And this can change pretty dramatically. You don't have to have days or weeks of dehydration to see the difference. Exercise recovery, of course, if you're working out dehydrated, you're not going to build muscle and lose weight like you would expect. Your sleep matters a whole lot here, because if you're dehydrated, your body is having to not do the processes that it's supposed to be doing, like your GI system getting rid of that food and moving it through your body, or doing repair work while you sleep. And even a 1 to 2% dehydration can impair things and have symptoms like attention issues, reaction times, mood stability. So it doesn't take much at all to see some noticeable differences. So it also helps with your saliva. So saliva, of course, helps with your digestion. It keeps your mucosal membranes moist. So the things that are pink in your mouth, that's your mucosal membranes, excuse me. It allows your bodies and your cells to grow, reproduce, and survive. And also helps flush that body waste, like I mentioned, mainly through the urine, lubricates those joints. It's a major component of all of your body parts and your organs. It's needed by your brain, not just for oxygen, but also to manufacture your hormones and your neurotransmitters. So that's that mood component. It regulates your body temperature with things like sweating or respiration, like I mentioned. The more we talk, the faster we talk, the more, we're going to use up that moisture. It acts as a shock absorber for our brain and spinal cord. So it actually can help prevent injuries because it's a fluid kind of cushion and active protection. It converts food components needed for digestion and survival, and it helps deliver oxygen, like we said, to the entire body. So dehydration occurs when the amount of water that we have leaving the body is greater than the amount coming in. And it's a very dynamic process, meaning that it's always changing. So that's especially true with water in the body. We lose it routinely because of how we're breathing, how much humidity is in the air, how much we're sweating, how much we're urinating, how much we're having bowel movements, and then how sick we are. Of course, like if someone like a patient has a burn, even a skin burn, a sunburn, that can actually make you more dehydrated. So in a normal day, a person needs to drink a significant amount of water to replace this routine loss that we have every day. And so dehydration at a glance, we need it to function, but we also need it to be, something that we're at ideal function. So dehydration occurs, like we said, when we're not taking enough in or we're losing more than we're taking in. And those symptoms can range from mild to life-threatening. The thing is our body is really good at compensating. So people often will think, well, if it were such an issue, then I would know. Like I would know that I was having a lot of issues with dehydration. But because our body can only kind of misfire or give us symptoms in so many ways, a lot of times what we think is one problem might actually be something more simple like dehydration. And our body will compensate. And so we might not actually equate it to being dehydrated. So symptoms range, like I said, from that mild, kind of brain fog to things like life threatening, like you have severe dehydration. So prevention is really the first step. And people who are young, young kids, and then the elderly, and then of course people who are chronically ill have the most susceptibility to dehydration. So it's important that if you have, someone who's older or younger, or someone who has an impairment or a chronic illness that may prevent them from realizing that they're thirsty, it's important to monitor that. So signs that you're mildly dehydrated, afternoon fatigue, especially around 2 or 3 o'clock, because that's when our hormones change. If you have frequent headaches, if you have a lot of cravings, especially for sugar, constipation, dry lips, dry skin, brain fog, irritability, dark urine. And so that's going to look like kind of that mellow yellow Mountain Dew colored urine, or feeling inflamed or puffy. So how do you actually know how much you need? Like I said, it's all about trial and error, but I really do believe in doing the half of the body weight in pounds in ounces per day. So the 150-pound person, 75 ounces daily. I think that's a good starting place. And then just know that it probably needs to land somewhere between 64 ounces and 128 ounces, in that pretty broad range. And this is just water. So this is not water that you get from your Cokes or your coffees or other things. This is just pure water. Now it can have something like an element pack or something that you prefer to use. There's tons out there, but it needs to just mainly be water and then electrolytes if you add those, which I recommend. You can have overhydration, so you can have what we call water toxicity, and that has happened, especially with a lot of people who do sports or who may have disordered eating habits that, go on these water diets and cleanses. So you definitely want to be mindful of that. Exercising, sweating, drinking caffeine or alcohol, traveling, especially by airplane, pregnant or breastfeeding or high stress, you may need more water. And you're going to have to really decide how much water that is. So, coffee, tea, and electrolytes. Caffeine can be a mild diuretic, meaning that it can get a lot of your fluid off of your body. And that's why sometimes people will suggest caffeine or coffee in the morning if you're having some constipation. We are getting our alerts. So if you have constipation in the morning, a lot of our elderly patients would always tell me, like, sweetie, I'm constipated. I'm going to need to get my coffee. And then, we would have to say whether or not we could actually get them that coffee or not. Sometimes you can't in the hospital have fluids or have coffee. But it's really common to use caffeine and coffee in that way. It does count towards your fluid intake overall, but it really needs to be limited in terms of what you actually are counting for your water. I would say at least 64 ounces at a minimum needs to just be plain water or electrolytes only. And then exercising. If you're exercising over 60 minutes or you're doing something really intense, like HIIT workouts, very cardio heavy workouts, definitely consider electrolytes. If you're a heavy sweater, if you have illness like vomiting and diarrhea, if you have a low carb diet, and those are all times where you might need more. There are certainly many other examples too. And the basic components, the kind of the formula for electrolytes is usually going to be sodium, potassium, and magnesium. And so it's really important to look at those three ingredients. Element packets for me, I have to half them. I can't do a whole packet because it's too much of those three for me. The way that these were developed, and the way that they are kind of made, and the composition of them, I think really is probably suitable for maybe like a person of a more substantial weight and body mass and muscle mass. My understanding is they were originally made for folks in the military and athletes, and so they were kind of made with that size man in mind. So many women and like teenagers, my teenagers will drink them. We'll do something else. Now, I like a lot of other little packets. I like just ingredients. That's the one that I use most often. But we just happen to have Element in the house more. I like the buoy drops. If it's an electrolyte packet, or a little squeeze, I probably have tried it and probably like it, just as well. You also can use like your own ingredients and make your own electrolytes, and we have done that before too. Just using ingredients off of Amazon, and honestly, that's the best hydration I've ever gotten, is just making my own. But I always feel a little bit like a chemist, and I don't always love, making my own in that way. But I have never felt more hydrated than if I just took that or went and got an IV. And you can do IV hydration. One of the things that I really do like is that sometimes we call it forcing fluids. It doesn't sound as good when you're talking to the general public, but we talk about forcing fluids, meaning that you're very dehydrated. You need to get fluids in you. And sometimes you just can't for whatever reason. A lot of folks who are taking like GLP-1s, or who are taking GLPs plus, the GIP or some of the other weight loss medications, typically will be much more dehydrated than the average population, because it just makes it difficult to drink water, mostly because you get so full in your GI system and you just don't feel like you can take any more water on. So if you are on a GLP-1, that would be another one of those factors of you probably need to be more mindful about your water intake. But sometimes we can't force those fluids enough, and so we have to go get IV hydration. I have a condition called dysautonomia. It's another one of those many other conditions that, typically if you have dysautonomia, or what we call POTS, it's recommended typically that you go get an IV a month. And I don't do that just because, I'm not independently wealthy and I don't always have the time to do it. But I probably will go, depending on the weather situation, and get an IV today. And if not today, tomorrow, because I know I'm so puffy. I feel a lot of the symptoms that I'm telling y'all about. I always joked and told Miranda, every time I teach something for Wellbama, I like something in my life comes up around that. But I think it just helps me be more relatable, because head knowledge, I always say this, doesn't equal habit change. And it doesn't mean that your body or your life always cooperates with you. About 25% of our health is habits, though, and it's like lifestyle things that we can change and that we can try to impact. About 25% are our circumstances, just things that happen to us. And about 50% of it, people will tell you, is genetics. That's true for, our happiness level, and that's true for a lot of our health factors. Again, it varies widely, but that's a general formula when we look at it for wellness. And so we're really focusing here on what we can control, and noticing habits, noticing, patterns that repeat. So I know for me, if I'm going to prioritize things, I should have done this last week, but toward finals week, dead week, finals week, post finals week, I get very tired, very run down, have more stress, have more things going on, as we all do. Those are good weeks to prioritize getting more water in, getting more movement, all of those wellness basics that I've taught for years, and then going and getting supplemental things. Like for me, it would be really appropriate. Probably should have gone last week and gotten an IV, and I probably wouldn't be where I am today. So it's just a kind of a reminder. And I did that in the fall, and it worked out really well. I didn't have that kind of like downward spiral with my dehydration and my health. And so it's really good to kind of like fall off the wagon sometimes, right? And remember the things that you put in place that help you stay focused, because sometimes we get to doing something and we just don't stop to reflect, like, hey, is this thing actually still working, still serving me? Should I be doing it? So some other personal risk factors are things like your age, your weight, your personal fitness. Of course, the older we get, the more weight we have, the more challenges we have with our personal fitness, the more likely we are to get dehydrated faster. If you've had a heat stroke or heat exhaustion in the past, or any kind of heat related illness, you're more likely to get dehydrated. I would say also, if you tend to have fevers, I think that that's probably a key component, because you're sweating things out with those fevers. Um, Medical conditions, like I've mentioned, heart conditions, diabetes, your diet. So adding a lot of sugary drinks or heavy or spicy food causes us to sweat and need more water to dehydrate, and more, water to metabolize. Alcohol, of course. It's kind of one of those recommendations. Oh no. One of those recommendations that for every alcoholic drink that you have, you need probably a glass or 2 glasses of water, within reason, because again, you could overdrink and overhydrate, but that's usually a general rule, at least 1 to 1. And about 75% of Americans are considered to be dehydrated, even if they don't know it. So we haven't talked about high levels of salt, but high levels of salt, particularly table salt. We're not really talking about Celtic sea salt, Himalayan pink salt, those kinds of good salts, but we're talking more about like regular table salt, the kind of salt you're going to get in processed foods and takeout, that kind of thing, can also be very dehydrating as well. I mean, salt is used to dehydrate things, so it makes sense that, table salt would also do that to us as well. And then tea, soda, other things like that can dehydrate. So most heat illnesses are caused by dehydration. It can be sun exposure, but a lot of times it's sun exposure, but primarily dehydration with that sun exposure. A person can sweat out about a liter of water an hour with heavy exertion, and most people exposed to these hot conditions aren't drinking a lot of fluids in general. So think about, you're out at a baseball game, maybe you work outside, maybe you do a lot of outside activities on the weekends or in the evenings. You're not, if you're doing a lot of active things, you're probably not drinking a lot of water. Or you may be drinking fun things that dehydrate you. Also, lots of lake days, beach days. We have the most, natural and, non-salt water in America, in Alabama. So a lot of our time is spent like at pools and lakes and beaches and things. And so, being really mindful of those times to, when we talk about pre-gaming in the fall, you really need to pre-game with your water and your sunscreen when you're going out and doing these activities in the warmer months. So by the time the person is thirsty and knows it, they probably are already 2 to 3% dehydrated, which is what I mentioned earlier. And it is hard to make up for lost hydration. So sometimes an IV is really helpful and maybe the only thing that you can do. So diabetes, vomiting, diarrhea, which is the most common medical cause, burns, heat stroke, and heat exhaustion. These are some of them ones, but things like dysautonomia, POTS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, many other genetic things can also lead to dehydration faster. So the body, of course, when it's sweating, it's taking out a lot of those, good toxins and just different things that the body would naturally probably urinate or void out. And so it's really important that if you do start to sweat, or you're sweating on purpose, like with a sauna or with a heavy workout, it's important that you don't let that sweat dry on your body, because then your skin is reabsorbing all of the hard work that you just did. So it's really important to pretty immediately then go shower that sweat off so that it doesn't get reabsorbed into the body. But a brisk walk, especially when you're outside, can generate up to 16 ounces of sweat, or about 1 pound of water. And so that's really kind of important to realize if you're outside, how much have you actually consumed in water and how much have you likely sweated out. You want to take a lot of precautions with that. So the skin has an important part in protecting us. It helps with fluid regulation and temperature, but it also protects our organs and our internal, environment. And so when the skin is compromised, even if it's just from a simple sunburn, that can cause a lot of issues for the body, especially for hydration. So that skin is considered injured even with a slight burn, and then it can maintain control of that regulation of the temperature of the fluid and all of that protective mechanism. So burn victims, and that could be a sunburn at the beach, or that could be someone who's actually been in a fire or had some other type of chemical burn, become dehydrated much faster, and it actually will seep water from their skin. I was a teenager in the early 2000s, and we would spray hairspray and all sorts of things on our skin to tan quicker. And I, had a tanning membership and went to the beach. I was always outside. I love the sun. I love the water. And so I was always getting burns. But I remember one spring break in particular, one of my good friends and I went to the beach, and it was a rainy, cloudy, stormy day, like it's going to be this afternoon. And we went to a tanning salon that we had never been to, of course, and they had given us a amplifier lotion to put on our skin that I had never tried before. And they're like, "Oh yes, if you want to go back to high school looking like you've been at the beach," because it had been rainy and cloudy. So we looked like a piece of paper. Our skin was very pale, and we were, in high school, so we didn't understand. And the tan back from spring break was like the best thing, right? And so, very silly of us, but we put that on our skin, and I developed water blisters all over my back and arms, and it was that water seeping out. Then they had to be popped. And y'all, I have so much respect and love for the sun. I never ever let myself do that kind of damage to my skin again. That was my lesson learned. And I did go back to school with a tan, but it was very red and very painful. And I learned my lesson the hard way, as we often do. But things like water blisters and all of that, that's more likely to increase your skin cancer risk and things like that. So, and I have had some abnormal moles because of that. I've had over 17 removed. And that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot for any age, but that's a lot for midlife. So, other inflammatory diseases of the skin are also associated with fluid loss, things like psoriasis, eczema. So just protect your skin, wear sunscreen, hats, protective clothing, but also have your water with you. Oh goodness, I scrolled too far. And then medication types, things like allergy medications, anything that's going to kind of like dry up mucus and secretions is going to, do that for your whole body. And so cold and cough medicine, blood pressure medicine, heart medication, if you are taking anything for IBS or GI, issues, if you're taking anything for diarrhea, obviously that's going to make it more, dry everywhere in your body. Laxatives, a lot of mental health medications, seizure medications, thyroid medications, and then, of course, the diuretics that people often take, usually for high blood pressure, but for other things. And there's many, many more. So most medications, I would say, are going to probably lend itself more to dehydration than anything else. So warning signs: extreme thirst, dry skin, tear production, if you can't cry, um, muscle cramps, heart palpitations, because the heart's just a fancy muscle. So the heart's going to get a little bit wonky if it's dehydrated. Fever and chills, those food cravings. It's usually sweet, but it can be salty. Headaches, nausea, vomiting, fatigue, sleepiness, dry mouth, bad breath, lightheadedness, and then, of course, the decrease in your urine output and the darker color. So, like that mellow yellow Mountain Dew color. These are like kind of the really severe signs of dehydration. So, we mentioned most of these. You also can have some PMS and menopausal symptoms because of dehydration. And then we mentioned some of these others. But you can have hunger. We can think that we're hungry when we're really thirsty. And most of the others we mentioned, but you also can have reduced resilience because when you're not operating at your optimal, then of course you're not going to respond with a very resilient mindset. So it does definitely impact your mental health. So this is the hydration scale that I like to use. Of course, the darker the urine, the more likely you are to be dehydrated. We want urine to be a pale yellow color. So I was teaching a student in the honors college years and years ago, And he said, "Oh, you mean that," they were just asking me random questions, and they asked about dehydration. It was the summer and it was hot in our building, and we were across campus, and they were like, "It's so hot," and everyone had their water bottle. And so they asked a question, and then one of the students said, "Well, are in your urine supposed to be clear, like completely clear?" And I was like, "No, it should be pale yellow." And he said, "No, but I was always taught that it should be clear." And I was like, "No, no, no. You want it to be clear in terms of it's not cloudy, but you don't want it to be clear in terms of it has no color." And he was like, "I feel like I have been lied to." And I said, "I think it was just a misunderstanding." And so I really like to tell people about that day because clear and cloudy mean different things. If it's cloudy and looks murky, that means that it's likely that there may be an infection. And so clear just means that when you look at the urine, there's nothing in it. It's clear as in like visibility clear. Like when we go to the beach and we're like, "Oh my goodness, I can see the sand." That kind of clarity, not clear in the sense that it has no color. And so that's really important. So a pale yellow color, like a very, very, very light lemonade color, is what you're going for, not mellow yellow and not beer. So this bottom, it would be more like a beer color. And then I would say this kind of mid tier would be more like a mellow yellow Mountain Dew color. And you're looking for more of like that kind of watered down lemonade color. So here's another example. This transparent or clear, it's just, so important the language we use. We say clear, and that means two different things. And so that's why I think a lot of people get confused. So they use transparent here. You're overhydrated. You need to probably pause the water. But lemonade is what you're looking for. And then you can kind of go up. They use the beer analogy until you get to burnt orange. And burnt orange, that's where you need to be calling someone. I have had chronic UTI since I was a child. I've had chronic health issues since I was a child. Like y'all have gotten my whole medical history in 7 years, but I like to share because I think it helps other people understand. And I have gotten to the point of having burnt orange urine. I ended up having a kidney infection. It was a UTI that became a kidney infection. And so I have actually seen this color urine, and it's very scary. And it's also very painful. You're usually having back spasms and pain by the time your urine is that color. So hydration, it's not just water. It can be the IV fluids like we talked about, but it also can be things like popsicles, especially for kids or elderly folks. It could be things like cucumbers, watermelon. Mint can really help when you put it with water. Lots of different things contain water and electrolytes besides just IVs and water bottles. So I mentioned the kind of, recommendations overall. I just wanted to be able to give you kind of like a first glance, here are some things that if you just wanted to look at one slide, that would be pretty helpful. Sports drinks and energy drinks, they're usually high sugar content. If they're not high sugar content and you get the ones that are more diabetic friendly, they usually have a lot more chemicals now. Obviously, avoiding a lot of alcohol consumption and caffeinated drinks with all of that, like we've mentioned. And pre-gaming, just like when you put your sunscreen on to go out in the sun, go ahead and fill up your water bottle and start drinking it, because once you get out in the heat and the sun, you're probably already going to be a little bit too late to get ahead of it. Um, so yeah, and the hottest times of the day, at least in Alabama at this point, is like 10 to 2. That's when you're going to be the hottest. That's when you're going to get the most sun exposure and UV rays. And so that's when you're going to be more likely to get dehydrated. So I always tell people early and often, anything you could do for wellness is do it early, do it often. So aim for sipping water every hour. Remember kind of this 2B mindset principle that a nutritionist did for Beachbody years ago is water first, veggies most. You can get good water content from veggies. Check your urine color. Here's another thing that shocked that student that I taught. And he was a delight, very intelligent, like asked me so many questions. He kept me on my toes. He helped me change the way that I teach. So I always think back to him. But he said, "Well, yeah, when I look in, the toilet, like that's how I know that my urine's okay." And I'm like, "No, because it's got toilet bowl water, or it should, and so that's diluting your urine." I was like, "So you can't just look at your urine in the toilet bowl. You actually probably need to collect some urine and do it, by looking at the collected urine, not watered down in the toilet bowl." And I think I just really blew his mind. And he was like, "Really?" And then the whole class was like, "Yeah, we didn't know to do that." And I was like, "Well, you wouldn't do it often, but if you have a need to know, if you have a, condition or you have something going on, that's the way you do it. He's like, so do I just get a solo cup? And I was like, that's what I would do. That would be the easiest, or like a clear, disposable drinking cup. And so that whole class really had a good kind of adjacent topic for the day. But that is what I recommend because it's just the easiest and then you can toss it. Um, Tracking your water, making it fun, eating your water as much as you drink it, like with fruits and herbs and popsicles and things like that. Just kind of avoid that added sugar or added caffeine. And then rewarding yourself for staying hydrated. I believe in rewarding myself. So, get a new water bottle. So, because I've had these ongoing kidney issues and I have a million cups, I just got a new beautiful cup from the College of Nursing today. Always am getting cups, right? One of the things that I did is last night I noticed that the Hydro Flask, which is my favorite to drink from, is on sale. Some of the colors are on sale out on Amazon right now. So I went ahead and ordered a second one. So what I'm going to do at night when I fix my overnight oatmeal, I'm going to go ahead and fix my 2 Hydro Flask at night, put ice and put water in them. And then that way I have 2 ready to go the next day. So when I get to those 2 water bottles, then I know that I've gotten my 64 ounces in, and then everything else is bonus or extra credit. And that's what I'm going to do to help set myself up for success this summer. So habit stack, drink your coffee, fill your water up, sip, during a commercial on your TV program if you are, still have commercials for something. Um, when you go take your lunch break, get another water. Those kinds of habit stacks really add up. And then make it fun. So, like, you can make little drinks like this, like that you have the fruits and the vegetables and the herbs and all the things, right? So, flavor with fruit, set gentle reminders, set a timer every hour on your cell phone. Get up, do 10 squats, or take a walk around your building, refill your water bottle, and then you've given yourself a nice little micro, like a nutrition break and a little micro movement break, all together. So you've habit stacked that, and you've gotten away from your computer, your Outlook for a minute. So there's some other things, adding a pinch of sea salt or a squeeze of lemon can help with hydration in the morning. If you don't want to add an electrolyte packet, using a straw can be helpful for some people if you don't like the taste of water. Keeping your water visible, so keeping it within arm's reach is really helpful. And then pairing it with transition. So, like, I go and refill my water before I go home just so that I have something to sip on my way home. So, things like that help make it practical. And then if you're drinking soft drinks, it's easier to add the water and then to take out the soft drinks. So add more water and then, start to limit the soda. So when I was giving up Mountain Dew years ago, the doctor told me that I really needed to give it up because of my mitral valve prolapse. I promise I'm a lot healthier than I sound today. But I was like, okay, I will do that. Do you have a recommendation? He's like, well, are you drinking, Mountain Dews by themselves? I was like, yes, I am. And he was like, okay, give those up first because when you drink sugar and caffeine together with food, the food helps offset that more than it does like if you're just drinking it by itself. So over 10 years ago, I gave up Mountain Dew. My favorite place to get Mountain Dew is Taco Casa. I've always alluded to that, but it's my favorite place to get it with the little chipped ice. And I had to go home a different route every day for 6 months so that I would not automatically end up in the drive-through at Taco Casa on my way home. I could get like the shortest route home. I could not get home without going past it. So I drove all the way around town to not have to drive by it because if I saw the green cactus lit up, I would be in the drive-through before I even knew it. Like my car would just go there. It took 6 months for me to get off Mountain Dew. I was drinking 6 Mountain Dews a day, one at each meal and then one in between those, and that was so unhealthy. And so add in the water and then cut out the caffeine or the soft drinks. That helps to add before you subtract. And you can do the same thing with coffee too. All coffee is not created equal. So you definitely can get healthier brands like the mushroom coffees are a lot healthier for you. But cacao, like that is a really healthy thing, but it's just a matter of like, how healthy is it, right? Like, are you eating a Gordon Ramsay hamburger that has been like well prepared and it's got, really great ingredients? Or are you eating a fast food hamburger? Like they're not all the same. So Element, again, they have had some issues with some of their sugar content and some of the stevia and things. A lot of people get headaches from stevia. So if you use diet products or, get flavored things and you get headaches, it may be a stevia issue. I do, so I have to be really careful with flavors. They trigger migraines for me if I use stevia. So just kind of look at those packets and know they're getting better about being cleaner. But there's lots of other, options. And then this is a different version of a cup for a hydro flask. So maybe consider a 30-day water challenge. So this is here for you. Gives you some guidelines of when you should drink your water. And then some additional resources by the Mayo Clinic. And we would love for you to follow us on all our channels. And that is me. Do we have any questions, Marita?